My name is Vu Tran. I'm a novelist. I'm coming from Chicago, and I'm here in town for the Iowa Book Festival to do a panel and do a reading. The question I feel like I get asked the most is how much of my personal life is in the book, because the book shares with my life a basic premise, which is a couple of the characters escape Vietnam by boat, and spend 6-7 days at sea and then land in a refugee camp in Malaysia, which is what happened to me. I mean, I went through that with my mother and my sister, and we stayed in a refugee camp in Malaysia, an island called Pulau Bidong, for about 4 months. And so that basic premise is there. I think people tend to be curious about how much of that is true. You know, I can only write at my desk in my office at home. I've never written anywhere outside of that, no matter where I live. I can't write in a coffee shop like a lot of people can. And I have to have complete silence. The only sound I would ever have is like, sometimes I put on a rainstorm, like, just white noise. I kind of like that. But for the most part, I got into a routine, and I've been doing it for like a decade now, where I would start around midnight. I'd have a cup of tea and a thermos of boiling water, and I would kind of refill it all night long, and I would write until about 4 or 5 in the morning. I think the writer I emulated the most and the most badly at first was William Faulkner, and my time at Iowa was pretty much a process of eliminating all the bad aspects of emulating a writer like that, which is mostly wordiness and overly ornate language. I would say a book that really kind of influenced me as a kid was Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis. That whole idea of leaving your normal world and entering an alien world always appealed to me, and I ended up writing that story a lot. In many ways, I think that's a kind of a version of the immigrant novel, which I feel like I've been doing some version of all my life. I think I try to engage with other art, other kinds of art, whether it's TV or movies or reading, of course, or even music. I think, Frank Conroy used to tell us to meditate on the text, which sounds a little bit cheesy, but I think he was absolutely right. You go do something completely different from what you're doing right now, which is writing, and you just kind of let it kind of sneak its way into your head, the answer or the solutions or whatever. And so I do that. I try to get away. Reading helps, but it's hard for me to read when I write. The best thing for me to do is go watch a movie, watch a good TV show. I think music ends up helping in unexpected ways, whether it's to relieve myself of the stress or if it's, unexpectedly inspire me, though I hate that word. Oh yeah, I have a list of them. I keep a list of words that I'm constantly overusing. I mean, it's the ones that most people, some just, perhaps, little tics like that. You might be asking for something more specific to me, but I tend to have a structure in my sentences that I use a bit too much, which is that I keep adding on the sentence. You'll have the, how do I explain this? You'll have the complete sentence, and then I'll add on to it with, subjunctive clauses, and I find myself doing that a bit too much. There's so many things, I feel like I'm very proud of my novel, but I think there are things that I could have pushed myself, to. I think there's there's like formal things that I still want to do. There's in many ways with this first book I had to, and a lot of writers will say this, that they had to learn how to write a novel as they wrote it. And in many ways, I tried to take a straightforward route in the sense that it was so hard for me to figure out how to write it. So I let plot, direct me. And I think, I would continue, I've always think about plot, but I mean, I would like at some point to write a novel that's not so plot driven and to, let something else direct me, whether it's a voice. The directive could be the voice, it could be, obviously the characters or the ideas, or even the form. I mean, this novel, I think, I was always directed by plot. And hopefully it worked out. But I do feel like, the trust that you at some point have to give yourself, like you have to trust in your own process. And there's an element of spirituality there where you're trusting in not just the mechanics in your process, but at some point allowing your thoughts to kind of work on their own, if that makes sense. I think that's sometimes what people talk about when they say like the characters started acting on their own. It's a really kind of potentially annoying thing to say because it sounds precious, but maybe that's what writers mean, is that at some point you're trusting in your process and you're letting it happen as organically as possible. And there is a spiritual element to that, I think. I think anyone who takes very seriously the act of storytelling is a writer. And storytelling can take so many forms, obviously. But if you're, appropriating, inventing, and, taking seriously the consequences of telling a story, I think you're a writer.